CFR Network, CFR News. Good day, good night, all. Bonjour, hola, shalom, wassalam, all of the universal greetings. Trustfully, everybody is well. Thank yourself for surviving the zombie apocalypse, and most importantly, thank yourself for tuning into the broadcast. Once again, very special guest, feminine energy I am bringing in to the broadcast, and I'm also keeping this one local as well. So we've got someone from the UK with us, a author, critical thinker, astrologer, a tarot master, Maria Wheatley. Welcome to the broadcast. How are we, mademoiselle?
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule, firstly. Trustfully, the listeners will be delighted and intrigued with, firstly, what we're going to be discussing, what rabbit holes potentially. I would suggest everybody has a pen and pad ready to take notes. I think this will be most definitely an interesting topic and discussion. For people who are thinking again, where is Noble going to take us today? Could you flesh out my little bit of an intro and expound a little bit more, Maria?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been into the esoteric arts for most of my life, actually, for many, many decades now. And I've studied, as you said, tarot, the Romany way, by traditional Romany methods, because they didn't necessarily read books. They were taught the tarot by what's called the Song of the Tarot. So I now teach that. I've taught that for nearly 30 years now, actually. And my main forte is really dowsing and exploring ancient civilizations. But I do love astrology. I devised an astrological method called Druid Soul Star Astrology, which was, my book was published by Dolores Cannon, and she's one of the biggest past life regression therapists in the world. And I had the privilege of taking Dolores around numerous ancient sites across southwest England. So so that was lovely. But my real heart is in the ancient sites and the ancestors old.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's stay there. Where did we get this sort of passion and drive to look at all of this for astrology, tarot, and your main sort of indulgence, which is as you say, the ancestors, the ancient sites, our forefathers in essence?
I was taken to ancient sites such as Avebury and Stonehenge when I was about 8 or 9 years old by my family, and my late father was a master dowser. But more than that, there was this instant connection with something. I didn't know what that something was, and I don't think I fully understand it now. But it was a real deep connection, and I had the privilege of going to sites in my teenagers such as Karnak in Brittany, Cahokia in America, Serpent Mound in America. So it was, a kind of journey that was initiated in my childhood. And the older I got, the more I wanted to begin with solve the mystery of it all, as in a naive way, but realizing that the more questions that you ask becomes, less of an answer, more of a question.
Yes.
So it's ongoing. But it is a wonder, and it leads me to some amazing sites from Egypt to like I said, to Stonehenge.
So staying with the Stonehenge, as we are here in sunny Britain and the UK, what is your understanding? Because there are many theories behind, pardon self. Number one, who created such a monolithic sort of structure, and what was the purpose for the structure?
Yeah, I've got a new book coming out quite soon, actually, within the next sort of 4 to 6 months, called A Secret History of Stonehenge, where I really do unravel Stonehenge and other sites beside who built it.
Hmm.
Well, when we look to the Neolithic, and it's been dated, if we use orthodox archaeological dating, to that period, and they didn't look like you and I. What I discovered in 2015 was that the Neolithic people, they were quite short, men about 5 feet, 5 feet 4 tops, and the women about 4 feet 9 and even less. And they had quite narrow and small elongated skulls, not like the Paracas skulls of Peru, which are quite large,
Hmm.
but they kind of go up. These were coming out like much longer than our skulls. They were the ones that certainly built it. That is for sure, because it is a Neolithic monument. And Stonehenge, when people say, what's the purpose of Stonehenge? It's multifaceted,
Hmm.
for one. It's many things to many people over many cultures. But if we go back to the Neolithic, it was definitely an astronomical temple, firstly and foremostly to the moon. The heel stone, everybody thinks they know Stonehenge, and the heel stone is aligned to the midsummer sunrise. It's a
Yes.
near it's 1 degree out. Any archaeoastronomer of worth and merit, such as Clive Ruggles, will tell you that. Richard Atkinson, even though he got his photographer back in the day when he wrote Stonehenge in the 60s, he got his photographer to stand 6 feet off the access line to get that iconic photograph. It's more accurate to say that it's aligned to the moon. That's 100% accurate. And it's the moon's metonic cycle. So every 9 years, the full moon rises above the stone precisely on the axis line. But even more magically, if that full moon corresponds close to the winter solstice, then my goodness, you've got a sight to behold, because it'll be a blood red eclipse moon rising above the heel stone.
So it's lunar worship in essence.
Well, it's lunar. It's regarding the moon, which is far more complicated to calculate than the solar cycle, which you can do in a couple of years.
Mm.
The all of the marking out that they had of the 18.61 lunar cycle is quite complex. It's much more difficult. So they were lunar observers, and normally in ancient cultures, not necessarily worldwide, but predominantly, the moon is classified as feminine, the sun is classified as masculine.
Hmm.
So I foresee that Stonehenge was not a daytime monument. It was a nighttime monument to view the moon and have lunar ceremonies. And we must remember that back in the day, when it was in pristine condition, imagine that Stonehenge had a 6 to 10 foot wall, chalk wall surrounding it, reflecting the circular shape of the moon alone. It was brilliant white chalk. It was stunning to see in its various phases. So I say it's multifaceted because you've got archaeologists like Tim DeVille and the late Geoffrey Wainwright saying it's a healing center.
Hmm.
And I agree with that, but why? When we look back to the 12th century historian, chronicler called Geoffrey of Monmouth, he wrote the History of the Kings of Britain. He said that Merlin brought the stones to Stonehenge. It's much earlier than that. And that every single stone had healing virtue. And when we look to the earth energies, which I've studied for over 30 years now, they tend to have a really good healing resonance at Stonehenge, which you can measure in Hertzian fields, for example, and you can measure negative ions coming out of the ground, which my team certainly have. So I see it as, in part, as being an astronomical center. It's a healing center, and I think as well it had different attributes at different times of the year, because our ancient ancestors would have divided the year into 8 different very potent fire festivals, as they were called to the Celts. So at those different times of the year, different energies come into play, if you will. The sun is moving across the ecliptic, the moon is moving as well. So all of that together gives us a tantalizing hint at the magical side, the healing side of Stonehenge.
And am I correct in saying that it would have been on a specific sort of there's a few terms to this. Would it be a ley line where the energy?
Oh, more than that. I mean, everybody focuses on ley lines, but you know, the ley systems and a ley system, they were discovered in the 80s by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. Hamish forwarded one of my books, and I've doused with him. If you imagine a ley line has earth currents entwining it, like the caduceus symbol, and one earth current is male and one is female, then you have a very potent ley system. They are far, far more powerful than just leys. But one of the leys that I did research extensively that flows north-south, they're always very powerful north-south lines. Then it also linked into different ancient sites that were associated with the planets. For example, by that I mean Stonehenge, according to a very ancient document by the Reverend Edward Duke in the 19th century, Stonehenge represented Saturn, Avebury the sun and the moon, and there's a temple to the sun and moon at Avebury. And just in between those two iconic sites, Avebury's the world's largest stone circle. There's an even bigger, well, there was an even bigger henge there called Mardum, and that associated with Mars. And Den is an old English word for settlement, farmstead, and the like. And Mars, it would have meant the settlement of Mars. So you have this ley, you have these earth currents surrounding it, and you have it associated with the planets as well. That's the might of the ley that flows through Stonehenge. And then you have other earth energies besides. It's not just one thing at an ancient site. It's not just a ley line or crossing of ley lines. It's earth energies after earth energies and different types. Then you've got a geodetic power center.
And how on earth, I mean, most people these days think, you know, through time, man evolves. And of course, we evolve to a point. There is a point that we devolute, and I think over a period of time, 30, even, well, 100+ years, we have so far removed ourselves from the ancients that we're almost polar opposites. So in this current mind state, we're thinking, okay, JCVs, we've got machines and cranes. How on earth were the ancients able to create such wonderful and beautiful structures which cannot be recreated with modern technology?
I mean, that is the million-dollar question. But to the ancients worldwide, moving stone wasn't a problem. We think it's the major problem, but to them, they were moving tonnage. I mean, the greater trilithon at Stonehenge weighs 90 tons. The largest stone at Avebury Henge weighs 100 tons or more. So it was tonnage after tonnage that they were moving. And when it comes to places like Stonehenge and Avebury, the standing stones aren't in the earth. They're in chalk bedrock sockets. So you've got to dig out the socket to begin with, which that alone is quite a feat.
Yes.
Let alone put in 90 tons with a 10-ton lintel on the top. And the remarkable thing about Stonehenge is that apart from the greater trilithon, the other trilithons, they're only in the ground by 3 or 4 feet. So it's the sheer balance and equilibrium that they made into Stonehenge. And Stonehenge is an awkward site. The ancients created it on sloping ground. So one side had to go in the ground a little bit more deeper than the other side. It would have been much, much easier to have built it further on away on flatter ground. But they knew that the earth energies were the main reason why they had to site it on problematic engineering nightmare ground.
Definitely. And I have seen maybe 1 or 2 little mini documentaries of sorts, saying with photographic, I think maybe 3 or 4 photographs of what would appear based upon the narration and what we can see of in the early 1900s, them actually for well from the, as I say, from the narration, they're saying that these photographs prove that Stonehenge is not an ancient site and was
No,
made
that's
very.
wrong.
Have you seen any of this
That
stuff?
that's yeah, that's wrong. Because if you really do your research and you look back to how the antiquarians, going back to oh my goodness, to the 15th century, they drew Stonehenge then. And they drew Stonehenge with a leaning greater trilithon. And it wasn't until 1901 when Colonel Gowland raised that trilithon straight again. That's the pictures that you're seeing. You're seeing the reconstruction of Stonehenge. But when you start to look at the dating system, you can use what's called IOS, and it's where you get it's better dating than carbon dating. It's where you look to the ground to see the last time daylight touched that ground. Yeah.
Ah,
And yeah, it's a really good system, and that will give you dates for that. So Stonehenge is ancient. You've only got to look at the antiquarian pictures for one, and you've only got to read a 12th century manuscript by
yeah.
not just Geoffrey of Monmouth, who I've just mentioned, that described accurately Stonehenge, but going before that to, I think it was William to note that. Then you go to the Welsh Triads, and they are very ancient, and they describe the wonders of different ancient sites. So to say it's modern, that is really just a theory of somebody's
Yeah.
that is actually incorrect.
It's very lazy research just to see some pictures and say, okay, I can build a narrative on that. You do need to, as I always say, study to show thyself approved. And as I say, just looking at a few pictures, and when I first saw this, number one, saw the imagery, and then I looked at the little mini documentary, as I say, I thought this is, as you say, a reconstruction. Like there's something's happened there, and they're trying to put something right, kind of thing. It didn't look like that. It was like, let's try and recreate an old site so we can make it into like a tourist destination kind of thing.
Oh, exactly. And it was first done at the turn of the last century, but the main brunt of the reconstruction of Stonehenge, and again, I've got fantastic pictures in my research of the before and after the main reconstruction, which was done incidentally by Professor Richard Atkinson and Professor Stuart Piggott. They're the ones that really not only reconstructed Stonehenge back to its former glory, but also Wayland Smithy, West Kennet Longbarrow. They went into Side Silbury Hill. They were your back in the day sort of time team
Yeah.
people. They were the first ones to document it with the BBC, for example. So, but like I say, it goes way, way back to the Welsh Triads and the 11th and 12th centuries.
Can you flesh that out? I've never heard that term before. Welsh Triads. What was that?
Well, if you imagine that in the medieval period, and it could have been earlier from about the 10th century, but mainly documented from the middle medieval period, it's where all of the Welsh mythologies were written down,
Hmm.
and explaining our gods that we used to have, like the great god Bran and its association to London, and
Mm.
even Sir Winston Churchill took on that myth, for example. So it's a collection, if you will, of social history, but also the mythology and the magic of the landscape as well. And they're commonly called the Welsh Triads. And the Irish have the same as well in the Book of Leinster, I think it's
Hmm.
called, and different kind of chronicles there. The reason why England doesn't have its Celtic history is because the Normans came here and they did what was called the harrowing of the North. Basically, they trashed and burnt every single village, laying waste to York, and all of our mythology of our gods got burned, whereas they didn't necessarily go into Ireland or Wales or Scotland as much. That's why people consider the English, and they're not Celts. We're Celts, it's just we got the harrowing of the North, and they did lay waste, especially to the north of England, and it was really very, very shocking, the amount of genocide that was caused.
And it's interesting you mentioned some of the myths of Ireland and stuff. I remember reading some of that, some of the text, and it mentions did I use the term Flamorians or blue giants from Africa who came and basically helped them set up a lot of systems and buildings and stuff over there? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I mean the kind of the gods of ancient Ireland are the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of Dana. It was a goddess-based culture, and they had various wars. And it is interesting to know that the giants, because I described earlier that the Neolithic, the ancient British people were short.
Mhm.
They weren't giants. But the beaker culture that entered Europe much later, and all of the DNA tests are really quite fascinating that have come out of the past 5 years of research, say that they were much taller, they were much stockier. And when Sir Richard Hort and others in Ireland and England besides started to look at the Bronze Age people, they described them as tall, stout men, whereas the Neolithic were much, much shorter. So I think in Ireland, they kind of integrated all of these mythologies. And also they wanted their mythology to be, spectacular compared to the Welsh. So you've got competition with mythology as well. And you have to sift through all of this to get to the nuts and bolts of the truth.
And is that done by cross-comparative sort of literary research?
Yeah, exactly. You always, cross-reference and then cross-reference, because again, one of the most iconic pictures of Avebury Henge, the world's largest stone circle just down the road from me, is by Dr. William Stukeley. He was he got Druidry back on track. He was really wanting to make Druids the way of the future, but he manipulated his knowledge, because Avebury has 4 entrances, and he wanted that to be a serpent temple, and he wanted it to be related to the Druids, which the Druids didn't build it, they were much later. So he made this serpent temple, but that's incorrect, because there's 4 entrances that had 4 megalithic avenues, and he omitted 2 so that he could fit his theory.
Yeah.
And we've got to be careful of that. We've got to be careful. And I say to people, question everything, because no one person has all the answers anyway, but we can sift through things and double check, and then we're on course to being a truth seeker rather than a follower of somebody's ideas.
Ideas, thoughts, theories, agendas, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Most definitely, you have to question everything. At a point, you do need to sort of take a break at times, but you have to question it. And if it doesn't stand up, you've got to say, okay, well, that's incorrect. I have found that this is maybe more likely to be the case versus what you've told me. And that is empowering to do.
Exactly, it really is. And it's also, I love research, and I love looking through, times that have gone before us, and delving into those times past and seeing what you can come up with. And that's how I discovered the elongated skulled people of Stonehenge. It was by not following what the archaeologists said, but going back to basics and reading the original report. I was studying at Oxford Uni continuing education at the time for cap points for like a degree. And it's one way of, achieving that. And that's how I discovered something, by not listening to what I've been told, basically,
Yeah.
and delving into something.
And a lot of the times these amazing discoveries are made because people push against the mainstream narrative and study and find out that actually it's a lot different. to what the picture you've been painting.
And also, you know, when you go to these big establishments like Oxford University and elsewhere, they're all very similar. They catalogued things a long time ago, and it's not a good system, really. So when I was looking for the elongated queen of Stonehenge, as I call her, because she was a very prestigious person, a high queen or high priestess, she hadn't been seen since the 1930s. And the curator wasn't even aware that she had a long skull. She was really, you know, bemused by it. And so, you know, what I say to people is, you know, you don't have to have an academic background. You just have to be like Indiana Jones and have this enthusiasm to find the Ark of the Covenant, and it will probably get stashed away in a museum eventually. But that alone will get you kind of understanding the past and the truth, because there's so much awaiting discovery.
So much reference the Celts. Would you Where would you say that, what is the origins of the Celts? Are they indigenous to Great Britain, or were these a migrating tribe that then settled and set up shop kind of thing?
That's right. I mean, that used to be the model that archaeologists thought, that it was migrating people bringing different belief systems into the British Isles, and then that spread. But now it's thought that it was the culture that was predominant, and it was the culture that spread, and that spread from what's called Latin in sort of Switzerland area, and as well as the Germanic peoples. And it was the whole idea of, you know, having these massive feasts and having cauldrons and these amazing shape-shifting goddesses, and looking into the kind of other world, which the Celts did. They went away from sort of worshipping the sun and the moon as the Bronze Age and the Neolithic had. We know that because they integrated the sun and moon into their ancient sites, but into water. Water became the feature for the Celts, and it was seen as a portal to the other world, and a place where you could access information. And it's the archaeologist Francis Pryor comes out with quite a groovy idea, where he thinks that because the Celts deposited swords into watery places, and you find them from the Thames, everywhere you will find these ritualistic deposits. He thinks that's where the idea of the Lady of the Lake, of King Arthur fame, came from, is because they deposited things into lakes. And if you're lucky enough to ever find an Iron Age sword, you know, that would be an amazing thing. But it was actually quite a common practice to them. And so it was a completely different culture based on massive gatherings and massive feastings that were happening in the Iron Age. It's like Glastonbury turned up to volume 11. Yeah,
On a more natural level. Yes.
Yeah, without the 4G and the 5G coming 5G for Glastonbury Festival. Which is a sad reality. But no, in all seriousness, these were massive events, you know, that are on scale to somewhere like Glastonbury. So I think, you know, the Druids, we know what was consumed in some of these massive cauldrons that could have fed, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people, were stews, and a lot of alcohol was being consumed.
Oh, yes.
So, you know, you think the Celts were kind of, you know, removed from us, but they had similar ideas about what a festival meant to them. Is maybe in a roundabout way is what we would enjoy from a festival as well.
Now, from a visual standpoint, and from a modern point of view, in regards to our homogenized society that we have now, which we call Great Britain, would the Celts have been, because I have seen them in some books described as swarthy, some of them, like what would have been the makeup? Was it a multiple different quote unquote ethnicities, or was it one homogeneous sort of quote unquote, as I say, ethnicity that made up the Celts?
Oh, it was very diverse from the Bronze Age onwards, really, because when you look to the isotopes, that's oxygen levels in your enamel in your teeth, telling you where you were brought up for the first 5 to 6 years of your life. At places like Stonehenge, it's all over the place. It could be Germany, Switzerland, Egypt. These were cosmopolitan places where people were coming from all over the known world. We had trade at Stonehenge from the Baltic people for their beautiful amber, for example. These beautiful blue beads that came from Egypt and elsewhere, and
Yes,
we
the
were
blue beads.
trading.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really cosmopolitan. And very intriguingly, if you go back to the Mesolithic and the Neolithic, the elongated skulled people, they were very dark skinned with blue eyes. They looked quite stunning, quite different with these piercing blue eyes. That's the model of what's called Cheddar Man from Somerset, who's 9,000 years ago. So I see these places in the ancient world as being very cosmopolitan, exchanging ideas
Yeah.
about astronomy, culture, and what like how we would exchange today. It wasn't just the ancient Britons, the Bronze Age people, and women were quite powerful in the prehistoric world as well, and have been. They've just been kind of written out of history almost, apart from Boudica, who led the Iceni tribe against the Romans. I mean, she reached a lot of fame.
It's that classic era, and it was, I guess, around that sort of period, it was the switch from the matriarchal sort of rulership and dominance to the now what we see the patriarchal side.
Exactly. And when we kind of look back, even when we go to the Neolithic period, like I mentioned, the most prestigious long barrow, that's a Neolithic burial mound in Northwest Europe, was for a woman. And that's why I call her a high queen or high priestess. These were prestigious people. Not everyone got put into the long barrows in the Neolithic. The likes of me, I'll probably have a flat grave with a post above it. But it was the kind of the elite, the rulers that went into the long barrows that archaeologists find today.
Yeah.
So, but there were a lot of flat graves even then. So yeah, I see it as being kind of women-led, moon-dominated, and different cultures and diversity, and a peaceful existence as well. Because when the isotopes were taken from a man believed to be from either Switzerland or Germany, he came to Stonehenge probably for healing because he had a bad knee, and that's how it's interpreted today. So I think the people from Stonehenge would have been meeting these people that were ill with grace and with love,
Yeah.
and trying to help them. I don't think it was at that moment in time that competitive. It was more of a cooperation.
An exchange of ideas, an exchange of, even exchange of goods and services for the opportunity to, I mean, for instance, people went to Timbuktu to do what? To study, to take in the culture, to exchange ideas. Do you see a correlation between the Twa people, which some people would, which generally they're known as the Pygmies, and the Neolithic Celts?
That's the Neolithic people, the Celtic culture was later. But yes, I mean, these parallels, we need to kind of think outside of the box. Is what does an ancient British person look like? And if we start thinking out the box and we start looking at the evidence that's presented to us, again, they're not your classical British looking person by any stretch of the imagination. So we need to build up new pictures. But the history books at schools, they present ancient man that built, and it's normally man, it's not man, ancient man, bedraggled hair, wearing fur clothes, but they had combs in that time. So again, that is an incorrect image that is constantly spoon-fed to our school children.
It's all part of the fooling system, which more and more these days totally eliminates one's potential of being that questioning why, where, who.
Exactly.
After you leave nursery and you get to that primary school, that is it. Your imagination, it just stick a fork in it. So it's incumbent on us as adults, as parents. If you do have to put your children through the fooling system, you have to reinforce it once they're back at home. Like, okay,
The
what did
fooling system, I love it.
what were you taught today? What did they lie to you about today? You know, what subjects did you go through? Okay, well, let me just correct you there. This is what actually happens. Let me show you a book. You read this book. This is your homework, and at the end of the weekend, we'll have a little quiz about it, kind of thing. Make it fun, you know, with some kind of reward. So they know there's a difference. There is a parallel. There is a facade of what we touch, taste, and feel as the quote unquote world, and this reality.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the falling system. I like that. Exactly, and this is the main point. You know, how everything is projected in the ancient world. I see it the other way round. What I see, Noble, is this, that they had a far more advanced culture, and then we fell into decline in the Dark Ages, and it's taken us a long time to crawl out of that hole. Because when you start to look at even if you go to ancient Egypt, the older the monument, the finer it's made.
Yes.
The later the monument, it's even in the New Kingdom, and some of the temples in ancient Egypt do not exceed that which was built older. So the further back you go, it seems that the more well constructed and the more knowledgeable the people were.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree with that once they perfected the art of the pyramidal structure, because if we go further south to Nubia, Sudan, and we see the step pyramids, we see that as the starting point. And then we go to, you know, up the road a few thousand miles to the crowning jewel, Kemet, or Egypt, as it's known as. And we see the perfection of that first trial, because there's more pyramids in Nubia than there is in Egypt.
That's right. That's right. You know, you're clearly well read and knowledgeable on that, and that is very, very correct. The further south that you go, the more prolific that they are. And it's the same with Saqqara, the step pyramid there. You know, it's very different, and the bent pyramid, etc. But I do feel that the ancient peoples had a high civilization. And we mentioned earlier, you know, you mentioned Timbuktu, for example. In England, the Druids had, and the Celts had cores, C-O-R-S, and that was the colleges. That's where people would go to study, should you be lucky enough to be chosen to have been studied Druidry for 20 years. And it's interesting to note that the Chartres Cathedral in France, that was built above a Druid core, and lo and behold, Oxford University also built above a Druid core. So it's also the energies there, the earth energies. If you're on really good earth energy, you're relaxed, you're receptive to
Yes,
knowledge. Yeah. So,
100%.
and this is what I want to see for schools in the future, for the foolery, as you said. I think that's superb. If you put them on modern schools on a new build, you could do so much to enhance education, because it was Dr. Kathy Batchelor, going back to the 1970s, an amazing pioneer. She was a dowser, she was into earth energies. She realized that if children in schools were placed upon a particular grid crossing called the curry net, then their learning would not take off. They would be kind of feeling, you know, their brains would get smogged, as it
Yes.
were. You move them off that crossing point, and their learning ability goes up. So I foresee, you know, in the future, I'd like to see the schools, hospitals integrating earth energies, because there's been so much documentation. Dr. Kathy Batchelor, an MD, a physician, you know, not a PhD holder, as it were, although, you know, anyone that's got a PhD, that's fantastic. These were doctors that looked into geopathic stress and what makes us ill in terms of earth energy. And so by applying simple rules and simple followings, we can change children's lives and the health of adults.
Exactly. And you highlight a excellent point with what you've just said there, because this is common knowledge to the powers that should have never have been. Hence, schools, hospitals, the only ones that are built on these wonderful energy grids are going to be your old cathedrals and churches, and some of your Masonic temples and social clubs, and maybe a few governmental buildings. But your schools are going to be on those crossways where there's that brain fog, and then they create the schools to look like, especially these days, aesthetically they look pretty nice. But once you go in there, there are prisons. They're literally prisons. They're training the brain into, you go down this corridor, you go left on this corridor, and that's your destination. You sit there for 1.4 hours and you go to, it's just training the mind into an auto-programmed character, which then the adult then lives 70% of their life switched off, totally switched off, not questioning anything, just going, just going on an urge which they've just been taught.
And you've raised an amazing point, because in stark contrast, we have the public schools. We have a where I live in Marlborough in Wiltshire, you have a very famous public school where Kate Middleton went to, and many others besides. They all have a massive Neolithic or mound structure in them. Okay, so you've got this ancient site within these public schools. Eton has one. Just look it up. It was Sue Sheridan that joined these dots many years ago, and so these generate that. If you imagine that these great big mounds are like irrigating the land with energy, if we keep it their simple point like that, then all of these public schools are associated with those energies, unlike in Marlborough, the comprehensive, which my daughter Raven went to. That's what I mean. It's in stark contrast, because, you know, the Masonic builders that did a lot of the design canons on the old Etonian structures, the old Marlborough-like college, which is very aesthetically pleasing and beautiful to the eye. Wherever you go, it has sacred geometry, you know, so it is very encouraging the mind to expand for the select few. That's the problem.
Yeah. Let's hide it. Occult knowledge, hidden knowledge. Let's hide it. And if you have the gumption and the persuasion and the persistence to want to search for it, you'll find it. Along the way, you know, you'll have a lot of battles, you have a lot of stress just dealing with the information itself. And then once you're in receipt of said information, just maybe just the introduction, the foundational knowledge, you want to spread that to the world, your friends, your family, and they look at you like you're an absolute alien. Like, what on earth happened to Noble? Like, he was a well-adjusted person. He didn't question anything, and now he's questioning absolutely everything.
Well done.
Exactly. I mean, for good, for bad, for indifference, there's nothing wrong with a different point of view. There's nothing wrong with challenging the, you know, what you perceive to be different, or to be the majority view. If we continued down the lies of Father Christmas, aka Satan Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, if we said these are real and we never told our quote unquote children, oh, that was just a fairy tale, just while you growing up, you know, no harm, no foul, just a white lie, you know. But lying outside of the little white lies is wrong. But for the first 18 years of your life, I lied to you. It's total brain like meltdown, like what's right? So it's okay to lie about these little things.
Yes, that's why I think it's really important, you know, that we go to these ancient sites that our ancestors have bequeathed us, where there is amazing energy. I mean, I was only at Avebury Henge the other day taking a private tour around, and there was two little kids from London with their dad out for the day, and I was dousing, you know, some energy. Their dad said, "Oh, could the little kiddies have a go?" And I said, "Of course," you know. And they were just jumping up and down. They were realizing that the place was sacred. I mean, they didn't say that, but you could see it in their eyes, you know, the joy of being there. And places like Avebury are free sites. You know, Stonehenge, you do have to pay to go around, and you do have to pay for private access, a lot of money. Okay, but there's so many free sites out there, like, you know, the Rollright Ring, that's not that far from London. Avebury, as I've mentioned, and numerous sites towards the north of England, and in Cornwall. So we can go to these sites, as did our ancestors, and really connect to the energies there.
And draw from the energy. And most importantly, where possible, especially today in this modern society we live in, we have shoes on all of the time. We don't ground ourselves, like take our shoes and socks off and put our feet into the soil, if it's soil, or trustfully it's grass, and connect back with the earth, and just reset energetically. That's something that's just totally missing. Oh, it's dirty. It's not very clean. Should I take my shoes off? Oh, you know, yes, especially when we're on a quote unquote sacred site, a site which has been around for a lot longer than we've been on this plane of existence. So, you know, connect, draw from it what you can, do the research, and you never know what you will open yourself up to. Trust me, it'll be something very good. And that's it. That's a part of the step and part of the journey, which can take you to so many different places. Just being open-minded, not hippie-like and woo 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 woo. Just take a bit of time, take a breath, take your shoes and socks off, and just be in your own self. Recognize self.
Yes, and you know, with grounding again, the Earth has a beautiful natural DC electrical current. So that's also a part of the process, you know, as well. And when you're on, you know, especially at the near centers of ancient sites, the equipment I've used, it will give off the Hertzian frequency where it will really start to relax you, put your brain into encourage your brain, I should say, to go into, you know, alpha mode. So and a lot of the stones, like I mentioned earlier, Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century wrote that all of the stones at Stonehenge are healing. Because, you know, when you touch these stones, some people feel that they can feel the piezoelectrical effect, which gives you a tingle in your hands. But more than that, there's certain points on the stone where the megalithic energy can enter our bodies. And we've recorded that as well by using a lot of copper material to register any electromagnetic change that you have when you touch the stone. And when we think about it, stone has played such a phenomenal role in humanity's lives, and we even say touchstone, don't we, for good luck, and that type of thing. And even the coronation stone where the Queen would be inaugurated on, it's all to do with, you know, with stone.
Yeah. And the energy and the significance and the reverence that comes with it.
Access is you're away from the stones, but if you apply for private access on English Heritage's website, it is expensive. I think it starts at about £50, but you'll be able to go right into the heart of the monument. You'll be able to walk amid the stones, although they do stop you touching the stones because they are all powerful. And in 2010, they stopped the people touching the stones of Stonehenge, and the security don't like that at all, and will, you know, threaten to throw you out. And it's because in 2010, I mean, I've been going to that site for decades, and it was really rebooting up, really getting it kind of coming back to its
Yeah.
strength. That's when the ban happened. You know, you're not allowed to touch the stones at all, because a lot of people were getting downloads and information that they were feeling from the stones.
I can imagine it must be, especially at a solstice period where you've got all of those energy vortexes. You've got, you know, obviously a lot more daylight versus night light. It must be a very, as you say, energetic and splendid time. I've really wanted to go there around that period, but I've always been told that you've got to get there pretty early, obviously, to get parking. Otherwise, you've got to park miles
It's
away.
parking that's the problem. But
Yeah.
if you go to somewhere like West Amesbury and walk, then that's not too bad. Or if you go to Woodhenge, park at Woodhenge and then walk across the public
Okay.
footpath.
Yeah.
That would be my top tip. But as much as at the solstice, where you're mentioning it was the longest day of the year, so you've got lots of light. To the ancient ancestors as well, because we've always got yin and yang, day and night. The longest night of the year of the moon's metonic cycle, that was worshipped at Stonehenge as well, and that only happens every 18.61 years, and it's when the moon is at its highest, the high moon, and it's the moon's most northerly moonrise. And to view that at an ancient site, that's very, very powerful. So as much as the longest day was revered, the longest night was as well. And people forget about the longest night because they're, you know, again, you're focusing on Stonehenge.
Excellent point. And as you say, it's the yin and yang. You've got the solar energy, and you have the lunar energy, which is obviously bringing forth, and which has been, you know, depending on what chain of thought, you know, lunar energy, lunatic. It's some people bring somewhat of a negative connotation around moon and its effect, but as we know, in regards to, well, again, I'm going with what can be proven of sorts. I mean, the moon does affect, you know, the water, right?
Surface water, yes, it's, you know, you get the new and the full moon, but underground water, which is very powerful, and the ancients were looking for aquifers and underground, certain particular types of water beneath the ground. They're more to the sixth day after a new or full moon, and that's what the Druids wrote about, according to Pliny and Tacitus and writers like those. That the sixth day after a new moon was especially important, and that is the underground waters.
Mm. What's your knowledge in regards to the mounds in Ohio, in
The
America?
mounds in yeah, the mounds in Ohio, I mean, they've been excavated by Squire and Davis. They were part of the Smithsonian Institute going back in the day. In the 19th century. They found very large bones from those finds. But the mounds themselves, they're built very similar to Bronze Age round barrows over here. So they do share a similarity there. And also there was an author, a chap called Jason, his second name is escaping me at the moment, and Ross Hamilton. They were the first to really discover the Ohio giants, as they called them, which some of
Yeah.
them averaged about sort of 7 feet according to Jason's work. And they also manipulated their skulls to look a bit more rounder and were very muscular as well. He's done an entire model of one that came out of the Ohio Mounds, but they are very, very similar and quite close to the Ohio Mounds. You've got Grave Creek, which is a very large mound, which is very similar to Silbury Hill that we have here. So there's different cultures. And also you've got the America Stonehenge. It doesn't look like Stonehenge, but it looks like cairns, what the Irish would call cairns, what
Yeah.
we'd call long barrows here. And you have these amazing different sites. I mean, the America Stonehenge is not that far from Boston or Salem, where the witch trials were held.
Ah, yes.
That's that area. So it's a fascinating area. And the chap that runs America's Stonehenge, Dennis Stone, I know him quite well, and he's the custodian of the place. And so there's America does have more than the famous Ohio mounds. It has the structures like America's Stonehenge. Then when you go to the southwest, you have massive kivas and Chaco Canyon, which is at Four Corners in America. And that was a vast ancient site called Pueblo Bonito. And that was the largest building, over 5 stories high. And it couldn't be beaten until the skyscrapers went up in New York and
Wow.
Chicago. So, Pueblo Bonito was a huge, huge structure with thousands of rooms in it. So there's always mysteries to unsolve.
Definitely, that's a new one. I mean, I knew the ancients were doing, especially in North America. I knew they were doing sort of 2-3 story buildings. That's been documented in all of even Christopher Columbus's diaries and stuff.
Yeah.
But 5 stories, that is amazing.
Yeah, that's Pueblo Bonito. And after Pueblo Bonito at Chaco Canyon, it was either 4 or 5, okay, stories high with very unusual features, like a D-shaped monument with room after room after room after room. And then if you go further up to the north slightly, you come to the Aztec ruins. They were very similar to Chaco. Then if you go even further north to Wupaki is an amazing ancient site because it's very close to obsidian fields of lava. It's like obsidian black.
Wow.
And then you've got this beautiful red, like Sedona red rock, that type of beautiful
Yeah,
red rock.
yes.
And Wupaki's made of that as well. So you've got these 3 ancient sites, and they have these massive circular monuments called kivas, which can be likened to our stone circles. Although the actual proper word for them is tuzion. But a white man came out with the word kiva, so that must be true. But I mean, I'm sure that the Hopi, who are the interesting thing is the Hopi Indians, they were nomadic, and their ancestors, the Anasazi, they're the ones that created these permanent structures. So tuzions, which are the kiva, I prefer to use the proper name for them. These structures are mind-blowingly large, and they had great roads leading over 400 miles of roads leading to Four Corners. It's astonishingly vast.
I mean, talking about roads, I mean, looking at the Nazca Lines, I mean, that is an amazing feat of, like, where were the tools? Why did they
Oh,
do
yeah,
it?
it's mind-blowing. I mean, it really is. And when we kind of, look at all of these sites, like you say, the Nazca Lines and all of these places worldwide, and some yet to be discovered,
Oh, yeah.
truly, because of the rise in sea levels at the end of the Younger Dryas. You've got Doggerland that links England to the continent. There's going to be ancient sites, underwater, as it were. And that's what, I love about all of this, Noble. I just love about, what was going on there? What's
Yeah.
history? I want to go there. And I've had the great privilege of, traveling America in 2019 after speaking at a conference there. I went on a road trip with a very beautiful friend of mine called Michelle Hood. And we went to these areas, and they are equally as astonishing as ancient Egypt.
And what was the pardon self, what was the energy field like when you entered some of these sites?
There's a really good researcher that runs a bit like you. He interviews people, and I've often been on his radio show called Richard C. Hoagland. And
Okay.
And what Richard does, he measures torsion fields. Now, if you go on Wikipedia and you put in torsion field, it'll call pseudoscience and
Yeah.
etc. etc. That's what Wiki says. But
And for some of the movie buffs, they'll think of that film with Will Ferrell, is it? And they make that machine and they go back into.
I don't know about that, Noble, but I kind of get where you're coming from.
Yes.
But what Richard noticed that when he was measuring the torsion fields at Stonehenge and in the Mexican pyramids, Temple of the Sun and that type of area, then the torsion field could be measured 2 miles and up to 5 miles away. So what we're seeing is these huge areas of energy that as you draw closer, so to speak, it does become more intense and recognizable. But it's a bit like being in a bubble of energy.
And yeah. Okay. So it's notable. I mean, yeah. I mean, anyone who's in tuned in that respect knows when they enter certain fields and stuff. So yeah. That's a that will be a challenge for the listeners. Identifying different energy fields and that's again going into self, not just operating in the 3-dimensional self, but really thinking. Sometimes it's a very obvious, like when we enter a room and sometimes there's a bit of a tension. It's a bit deeper than that, and if we can tap into that, you can, as I say, you can navigate situations a lot easier, I would say.
I mean, what a lot of people do around standing stones, which your listeners could experiment with, they go straight up to the standing stone and lean against it, which is great, and do that. Definitely do that. But as well, start walking away from that standing stone that you've hugged or whatever you want to do, that standing stone, and move away slowly. Then suddenly you'll get to a point where the energy does feel differently. Yeah. And that's the kind of extent of its energy field. Yeah. So we can just by walking to and from to a stone circle, we can start standing stone, apologies. Then we can start feeling the different levels of energy. And it's such a simple thing to do. You just walk away from the stone.
And that's measurable. It's easy to get that sense.
You'll feel it, and most stone circles are associated with fault lines. They're never more than 1 mile and 2 miles from a fault line. So whenever you get the sun or the moon rising or setting close to an ancient site close to these fault lines, so to speak, then you get a natural phenomena that occurs where you get like a bit of an energy surge heading towards the standing stone. It's a geological fact called a shear force, and it will bathe that megalith in piezoelectrical energy. So that will become even more potent at sunrise or sunset, or moonrise or moonset. It's when a celestial body passes over the horizon line. It will cause these natural geological effects.
Do you think the ancients were able to draw from the quote unquote ethers and utilize that energy source to maybe transport said metallithic stones and make these structures?
Well, when we, again, thinking outside of the box and look into Western occultism with societies like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Eliphas Levi and many other authors besides, they always talk about the astral light that surround, that's what they called it. I mean, you could call it plasma, you could call it what, but that's that energy field is my point. And they have certain rituals where you could draw upon the astral light, and the astral light can be worked with to do certain things. So I'm very open-minded to what the ancients, could or couldn't do. One thing I do know is that they were advanced.
Oh, yeah.
They were an advanced civilization that we are only just beginning to unravel some of its marvels and mysteries.
Definitely. Last thing as we wrap this conversation up, what are your thoughts on this theory and idea of Tartaria?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Have you heard of the there's a theory that there's many of the old buildings, especially in North America, Europe, well, especially in Europe and North America, we can look at some buildings and there's photographic evidence of like mud floods taking place at a specific time across the world, which basically decimated places, to put buildings, totally buried them, other buildings which were taller, reduced them in size to make them how they appear to be today. And it goes further to say that this society, this Tartaria, which is more in Prussia, which we would call Prussia, and which is modern day Russia, that was the civilization hub, and it was technologically advanced. Cathedrals were created for the harmonics to create and promote healing. It was like a healing center. A lot of the churches, etc., they were created in such a way to draw energy down to then distribute freely, etc.
Well, that's just, for example, the way I see it in my research is there's no difference from a church spire to an obelisk from ancient Egypt or a standing stone. They tapped like acupuncture into particular energies, and they can draw that down and distribute it. And they can distribute it in different ways. For example, at the rollrights, the irrigation is the ultrasound, and it goes out from the stone circle. Some of the stones could be tapped in for agricultural purposes as well. So it was practicalities as well. The easiest thing that can be looked into, like I mentioned earlier, is when was the last time daylight hit that surface level in tests, and that can clarify an awful lot, whether it's a mudslide, whether it's anything, because you've got to remember, just to go down to the Roman period alone in South England, then you've got to go down a meter, and you've got to go down very far to get to the Neolithic old surface level. That's why they're using these, new techniques to have a look at the areas, and LiDAR helps as well. So yes, they're harmonic places, cathedrals. They have sacred geometry. They have a lot of things going on, and predominantly after the directive of Augustus, it was to build them on ancient sites anyway. Augustine, sorry, to build them on pagan sites anyway.
Yeah.
And then Catholicism just took all of the name of the ancient gods and made them a saint. So Hermes became Saint Christopher, and Brede became Bridget, our great goddess of Ireland and Wales. Brede, she became Bridget, and so on and so forth. So
Reappropriation of titles and names to suit and fit the agenda of
exactly.
the age-old tale, but we have some critical thinkers still. We have researchers, we have courageous people like yourself who are doing the work, and shedding light on some of the mysteries, and trying to answer some of those questions. It's very much scratching the surface, because there's so much more out there to discover, number one, as you said, and to really get mainstream science out of the carbon. What was it? What were the carbon 8? Was it carbon dating?
Oh, carbon dating. Oh, yes. I mean, it's that's all going to change, I think, pretty soon. That's a bit old hat, and it's unreliable.
Exactly. Very. The changing of
And we need,
science.
we need new enthusiasm, new ways of doing things that are non-intrusive as well. But I know that there's new generations of people that are coming up the ranks at the moment in archaeology that do question more. So I have a great faith in the future, because they're not following the old school, like Atkinson, that all the kind of basically toffs with trowels.
Yeah.
They're coming up from grassroots levels and asking really good grassroots questions, and they'll be the ones that advance archaeology, in my humble opinion.
Most definitely. Maria, have you had fun today?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Excellent, excellent. My last question for you, mademoiselle, is please tell us who you are, but do not tell us your name.
Hmm. Well, what do you mean?
Describe yourself in
Describe myself.
yes.
Well, I suppose I'm a lover of finding things out, like I've said. That's my passion. My passion is to understand the ancestor story, which I'm unraveling, and I'm a mum as well, and I care so much about our planet that I try to live as well as I can with the resources that we have. So I'm always thinking of Gaia, who is my Earth Mother and my love.
Excellent, excellent. Again, thank you so much for your time. Please throw out all of your social media and website information, and I'll make sure I'll put the links in the description.
Thank you. Yes, you can find more about me at theaveburyexperience.co.uk, and I've got a teaching platform, esotericcollege.com, and I'm about to have a conference on September the 3rd in Avebury, where we're going to have an interactive day at Avebury with Druids and with Wiccans on September the 3rd at Avebury, and I'll be with a 19th century generation White Witch leading a workshop at Avebury on April the 10th this year. That should be amazing. She's not often in this country.
Where is she from? Where is she from, Europe or?
No, she's originally from England, from the New Forest area of Coven, but she now lives in Canada. But she's coming over here, and we're going to be hosting a workshop together. She's my sister. She's amazing knowledge of all things Wiccan, the craft, and the way of the old ones. And so anyone that comes along will be learning a lot. And that's going to be on my website coming up with next week. That workshop will be on there, and she's called Matilda. So
Excellent.
M&M, Maria and Matilda.
This is it. You want to make a little flyer like that in that kind of format? That'll go down a treat. Most definitely. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Trustfully, it will be an excellent experience. You'll have a good turnout at the events. As I say, guys, make sure you go and check out the website. If you're interested, obviously you are in good old UK and you are local. You do teaching and you do the tours as well.
Yeah, I've got a teaching Zoom platform, and I also do one-to-ones in the landscape. I do workshops in the landscape and go to various different ancient sites at different workshops. So yeah, so just check out my websites, theaveburyexperience.co.uk and esotericcollege.com.
Wonderful. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and most definitely share.